So with number 4, I'm just going to go ahead and start with writing my givens. I know that angle ABC is a right angle. I also know that ABD and EFG are complementary. And that comes from my given. All right, so step 2. I'm trying to get to the fact that DBC and EFG are congruent. And so kind of thinking about this a little bit ahead of time, I'm looking at this whole thing. I know that I have a right angle right here. And I know that ABD and EFG are complementary. Now, in my head, I can actually see, obviously, that ABD and DBC, those two angles that make up that right angle, those are obviously complementary angles. So if I can prove that, I can finally prove that EFG and DBC are congruent. But I have to take a couple steps in order to get there. So I'm going to go ahead and say that for my step 2, I'm going to say that angles ABD and DBC, they sum up to 90 degrees. So I know that because I know the definition of a right angle. And I finally eventually want to get to the fact that those two angles are complementary, but the definition of a complementary angle is an angle formed by two angles that add up to be 90 degrees. So since it has 90 degrees in that definition, I need to start by saying 90 degrees and then finally say that they're complementary. So my step 3 is just that ABD and DBC are complementary. And I know that because I know the definition of complementary angles. All right, so I knew step 2 from that first part of my given. I knew step 3 from my step 2. And my step 4, it's actually my final step here. I knew that ABD and EFG were complementary, and then I finally proved that ABD and DBC were complementary. So if two angles are complementary to the same angle, those two angles are congruent. So I can finally say that EFG and DBC are congruent angles. And that actually comes from my congruent complements theorem. Whoops, I meant to say that those were congruent, not and. Congruent complements theorem. All right, and I'm done. I'm going to write a couple more arrows here. I knew that that step 4, that actually came from that second part of my given in my step 3.